Good morning. Today is the 29th day of Shvat. Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first Adar this year because we have two of them. It's an intercalated year that has an additional month. This happens because there is a difference between the moon year, the lunar year, and the solar year of 11 days, about 11 days. And so every approximately 3 years we add another month. What turns out that every 19 years we have 7 years that are intercalated that have an additional month. It is also the 8th of February. And we are up to the 5th reading of Mishpatim. And here we're going to come full circle back to the beginning. If you remember, we talked about the fact that the crux of all Jewish learning is about these laws, everything that has to do with these legal damages and contracts. And it's most of what people spend their time studying. Now, I want to say something about that. You would think that if a person is legalistic in their approach, they're spending so much time on legal matters, then they would see everything in the world in that context. It's sort of like if you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So everything, all human relations would become something to be subject to law. And you wouldn't be able to flow naturally in your relationships with people. But not only that, if you're looking at things like a lawyer, then everything is grounds for litigation. Everything is grounds for suing somebody or something or whatever. And that seems to be a very harsh reality to live in. You can think about, people who are professional lawyers, what kind of life they have. Everything that they look at is possibly something that they would have to go to court over. We would say that in Hebrew that the person is living with dinim. He's living with judgment all the time. And that's not a very, very good life. Maybe some people need to do it, but it's not a very good life for everyone. So why is it that Torah learning is so much based on this? In fact, one could argue that it would be better to base it on the customs and laws that have to do and govern the relationship between man and God, and that we have in different parts of the Torah also. Would be related to prayer, it would be related to blessings, would be related to 1,000,001 things that are not related to law that comes to govern the actions of men. So let's see today something very amazing in today's reading that will shed a lot of light on this. So we're looking at chapter 23, Exodus 23, and it begins, "You shall not pervert justice for your destitute countryman in his lawsuit." In other words, just because someone is destitute, someone is poor, you should not change the ruling in the court. Theoretically, the justice system should be the same whether you are wealthy or impoverished. It doesn't really matter. The laws should be the same. But as much as that is a problem, is a topic in and of itself, the next verse is really where it lies, the crux of this issue. "You shall distance yourself from any falsehood. You shall not execute an innocent person." We'll see in a moment what that means. "Nor shall you execute an acquitted person. For I will not exonerate the wicked." So that's the literal meaning of the verse. What is it talking about? It's saying somebody was tried for murder, let's say, something that has capital punishment. And you found him to be guilty. The court found him to be guilty. Or the court could find him to maybe not guilty, but there's not enough evidence to decide this way or that. And there has to be a lot of evidence according to Torah. According to Torah, it's not enough to find a murder weapon. It's not enough to have beyond reasonable doubt, or all these things. When it comes to murder, the person has to have been actually seen by two witnesses committing the murder. It can't be hearsay, it can't be any kind of indirect proof or evidence, whatever it is. In any case, so what is the problem here? You shall not execute an innocent person. How do we understand that? That you should not execute an innocent person? I mean, obviously. Why does the Torah need to tell us something so obvious if he's innocent? So, the way that the sages answer this is that the Torah is not telling us the obvious. It's telling us something that's not obvious at all. Imagine that there wasn't enough proof. Meaning, there was one witness that saw the murder, but there wasn't a second one. Or at least unbeknownst to the court, there wasn't a second witness. And the person was sent out freely because it couldn't be proven according to the standards of the Torah. And a day later, suddenly the court discovers that there was someone else who was watching. And not only was he watching, but one of the conditions is that he could also see the other witness. And so there were actually two witnesses. They could see each other. It just happens to be that one of them didn't see the other, so he didn't know about them. But the second one did see it, and he ran away or whatever. He wasn't there, and you find him. Says the Torah, you cannot execute a person who was found to be innocent, not a person who is actually innocent, but somebody who was already acquitted. You cannot bring him back. So that's a very strong statement. It's coming and telling us the standard is that even if now you know that he's not as innocent as you thought he was, and you now have new evidence against him, you can't bring him back. In fact, there are 13 different explanations about this in the Talmud. They probably correspond to the 13 attributes of mercy, and so on. And we just brought one of them. So again, if a person was found guilty in a capital case, and someone says they have a reason, we're talking about he was found not guilty, then you don't bring him back. Okay, what's the issue with this? The issue is, of course, but what do you mean? But now we know that he's guilty. Says the Torah, for I will not exonerate the wicked. I will not exonerate the wicked means God is telling you, don't think that you're the only one who knows how to take care of society. I also know how to take care of society. And if it's not the court system that's going to execute him, I'll find my way of taking care of this person. Now, before we frown upon this and say, what do you mean? But what's the point of having a court system? If God is in the end going to administer the justice, what's the point of us having a court system? Well, the answer is simple, that we first have to do all we can. But if things were set up, and once we do all we can, then God takes care of the rest. This is the principle throughout Torah, that man can only do as much as man can. But almost to teach us that it's not all in our hands, he's saying here, but if he was acquitted, don't bring him back. Don't bring him back. Don't have a second trial. Don't say the first trial was false or whatever. Let me take care of it. Why? Because even the court needs to know that not everything in the end is in the hands of man. So if you do your part, says God, I will not exonerate the wicked. A person who was in such a situation that maybe even fooled the court in some way, and now the truth has come out, or at least you think it's come out, it's not up to you. There's a very interesting corollary of this, which is the other side. What happens when somebody is found to be guilty, and now we have new evidence. So say the sages, this is the first part of the verse. You shall distance yourself from any falsehood. You shall not execute an innocent person. Here, it's talking about someone who was found to be guilty, and now new evidence has come. In that case, you should try it again. That's what it means, that you should distance it. You shall not execute an innocent person. Again, otherwise, why is it saying this? It must be teaching us something new. So something new that it's teaching us is that if somebody was found to be guilty, and now there's new evidence that they're not, you do try it again. The interesting thing that comes out of this, and I hope we get to the main point because we're still a ways from it, is an essay called The Guillotine by Sartre. And he wrote this essay, I think, after World War II. His argument was that there should be no capital punishment. Why? Because the moment that you do not believe in God, you can no longer execute people. Why? Because what he's saying is that if you made a mistake, who will set the record straight? If you have God and you believe that the court receives its appointment from God, then even if you made a mistake, then you assume that God will set the record straight. However, what did we just see? That you cannot execute someone who you might have any kind of evidence might show up that they shouldn't be executed. So it's not even that simple as like Sartre points it, but it is the right direction. That the moment you don't believe that the court has its power from God, then you shouldn't be using capital punishment. And it's interesting that the places that use capital punishment actually follow this rule. What states in the United States use capital punishment? You can see that it's pretty much divided into blue and red states. The red states are more God-fearing. They believe that they have their sanction to execute from God, and so they do it more easily. And the blue states, who don't believe that they have any sanction from God, in fact, they might not even believe that God has anything to do with it, so they're careful not to have capital punishment. What does this have to do with everything that we discussed? What is this saying? It is saying, let's look at this at a moment from a different perspective. And we're going to go a little bit over the 15 minutes to finish this because this is important now. The Torah is telling us that things are not always what they seem. Let's take this verse and apply it to ourselves. You shall not execute an innocent person. So a person who's innocent, we don't, if we found him to be, let's take the second part, an acquitted person. We found someone to be acquitted. He's innocent. We don't bring him back. What would that mean personally? It would mean that if people tell me that I am a righteous person, even though I may have proof that it's not true, to a certain extent, I shouldn't run away from that. To a certain extent. But on the other hand, if people have told me that I am not innocent, then I should always be brought back to be judged, as it were. What is it saying? This is the basis of the Tanya. The Tanya is saying that people will tell you that you are righteous. To some extent that's true, but you have to know how to be open-eyed enough and not naive to understand that there's a deeper part of you that is not just how you act. It's not just your behavior. So people see the outside, they see the habits, they see the behaviors, and then they come to a conclusion that you're a righteous person. But you see on the inside, you see something deeper. Because you see something deeper, you know that you have to be brought back to trial. They don't know that and they won't do it. But you know that. You know that about yourself. And so you know about your inner self that you're not as righteous as people think that you are. That's called not fooling yourself. Meaning, we ascribe a lot of, and we give a lot of weight to what people think, to how people see us, but we can't fool ourselves. In other words, you have to be with eyes wide open about your own condition. What is this saying? It's saying that beyond behavior there is psychology. There's the behavior, which is the way that I express myself, but there's also how I actually am. And what does it mean, how I actually am? I know I'm privileged to knowledge about myself that nobody else knows. And so I have to hold myself in the right light. I have to know what the truth about myself is. That, said the Baal Shem Tov, is the beginning of all service of God in our generations. Not to be blinded to our inner self. Not to say that just because my external self is well respected and looks good and so on, that also means that that's the way I am on the inside. I'm not trying to execute myself in any way. What I'm trying to do is get to the truth. I have to be able to get the truth. It's true, I don't have to tell anybody else. Like it was said, they don't have to, there's no law that says I have to bring myself back to trial before the rest of the world and tell them. But I myself have to know what's true. I myself have to know who I really am. That is the basis of the churn that happened in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, when the psychology of people became the central core of serving God. That really what we are in the beginning of only is the psychological revolution, where psychology becomes the arena in which people serve or do not serve God. It's really there. We still have all the actions that we have to do. We still have all the behaviors that we have to follow. But the real question is, where does my inner state lie? Am I as righteous as I seem on the outside, or is the situation actually not as good as I say it is? And we've mentioned many times this idea that if somebody comes and accuses me of having done something wrong, they may not be incorrect, even though I never did that, because I have the inclination to do that. But I've had help from God, who's kept me, who's guarded me from actually going out and carrying out my inclination. And so externally, on the exterior, I may seem to be a very righteous person, but on the inside, I know who I am and I know what my inclinations are. And it could be that my inclinations are not as good as I seem to be on the outside. This is called by the Baal Shem Tov that the first thing you have to know is to be wise. He calls it pikech. Pikech is someone who has his eyes wide open. He's not naive. He sees reality for what it is. But first of all, he sees his reality for what it is. Now, getting back to our initial question, why are we learning all these things, all these laws, and spending so much time on them, if it would lead us only to be judgmental? So the Baal Shem Tov says, it's not about going to court. It's about having your eyes open, about being realistic about your true situation. And the only way you can learn this is through these laws. These laws of jurisprudence, what they do is they teach you to figure out when something is not the way it seems. It's not in order to take it to court and to win in a legal battle. It's in order to use it psychologically. What it's saying is like this, that the psychologist, the tzaddik who's looking at people's inner makeup, their psychological makeup, is actually taking his cues from all the laws that have to do with governing human interactions. One is actually the basis for the other. If you're a good judge, if you learn all the laws properly, and the main thing about being a judge is understanding how people fool others and fool themselves, and it's seeing through all this play that's going on in the courtroom. If you can see that in the courtroom, you can also see it in day-to-day life in people's lives. And then it's not used to judge them. It's used instead in order to see through the facade that they put up and to help them change their interior and to make them aware of their interior and to bring them to face the way they really are. That's, one would say, the true reason that in our generations it's still worthwhile to study these laws, because they teach you how to see the interior, both of yourself and of others. And so with that, we'll end. We went really over today. I hope the message got across. I still haven't put up the wonders, but when I do, it'll be written hopefully more succinctly and clearer. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow at 3:15, which is 5:15 Pacific and 8:15 Eastern.